The 2008 presidential election. Was it a landslide? Barack Obama received 365 electoral votes. John McCain received 173. Obama carried 52.9% of the popular vote. McCain carried 45.7% for an Obama margin of victory of 7.2%. And one of the things that I like to look at when I look at this map is, was it a landslide? By raw electoral college vote count, especially, with how, how elections have been, recently it probably is a landslide given how every election in terms of the electoral vote was closer than this. But then you get to 96 and it's like, well, that was more of a landslide. And looking at raw electoral vote counts, 2008, 1996, 1992 all fall in the same category. But 1988 looks like it's more of a landslide. And then certainly 1984, it's like doesn't seem like a true landslide election when you look at it that way. But then again, you look at other things like the popular vote margin and tipping point state in particular. And that sort of weighs in favor of why 2008 might be able to be considered to be a landslide. But we'll get to all that. One of the things that I like to look at is looking at the swing states of the 2008 election. What states are within 10%? And a lot of states that, when you compare the 2008 election to the 2012 presidential election, and you sort of analyze what the swing states are, you'll see how a lot of these have shifted right. Because and 2012 was still a sizable victory for the Democrats, but we'll just compare and contrast. Like, for example, the states under 1%. You have Missouri at 0.14% for the Republicans and North Carolina at 0.32% for the Democrats. Then next is Indiana at 1.04% for the Republicans. Nebraska's 2nd Congressional District voted for the Democrats by 1.22%. Montana only voted for the Republicans by 2.26%. Florida was 2.81% for Democrats, and Ohio was 4.59% for Democrats. Georgia voted for Republicans by 5.21%. Virginia voted for Democrats by 6.3%. South Dakota voted for Republicans by only 8.41%. Arizona was 8.52% for Republicans, and North Dakota was 8.63% for Republicans. Colorado was a tipping point state for an Obama victory, and notice how it was 8.95%. South Carolina voted for Republicans by 8.97%. Iowa was a tipping point state for a McCain victory at 9.54%. New Hampshire was 9.61% for Democrats, and Nebraska's 1st Congressional District was 9.77% for the Republicans. Compared to 2012, Florida votes for Democrats, but only by 0.88%. Notice how North Carolina flips red and votes for Romney by 2.04%. Ohio voted for Democrats, but only by 2.98%. Virginia voted for Democrats, but only by 3.88%. Colorado is a tipping point state. Notice how now it's only 5.36% for Democrats. Pennsylvania was 5.38% for Democrats. New Hampshire was 5.58%. Iowa was 5.81%. Nevada now enters the equation at 6.68% for Democrats, and Wisconsin was 6.94% for Democrats. Nebraska's 2nd Congressional District now votes Republicans and does so by 7.15%. Minnesota votes for Democrats by 7.69%. Georgia's margin of victory for the Republicans is 7.82%. Maine's 2nd Congressional District votes for Democrats by 8.56%. Arizona was 9.06% for Republicans. Missouri was 9.38% for Republicans. Michigan was 9.5 points for Democrats. When you look at this map and you look at the swing of the election, in most cases, they're swinging significantly to the right, as you can see on this graph. Only a few states wound up shifting to the left. And even though Romney couldn't flip a lot of states, in a lot of cases you could see how he brought them closer. He brought them closer. And 2012 was still a very favorable election for the Democratic Party. They won the popular vote by 3.9%, won the race 332 to 206 in terms of the Electoral College. So still a very favorable election for Democrats in 2012, but really nothing compared to 2008. But this is where you sort of have to understand the idea of you can't just look at it in terms of raw, in terms of the raw number of electoral votes. Because Bush beat Quayle 426 to 111. Should have been 112, but there's a faithless elector in West Virginia. And the popular vote, Bush wins by 7.7%. So notice how, despite the Electoral College looking a lot more convincing, notice how all of a sudden now it's like, the popular vote's pretty similar. And look at what the tipping point state is. It's Michigan at 7.9%. That's closer than what it was in 2008. 1992, again, around the same electoral college-wise, with it being 370 to 168. Notice how the popular vote, though, Clinton only carries by 5.6%. And the tipping point state was Tennessee. Tennessee voted for the Democrats only by 4.65%. Now, 96, I would say, is really similar because it was 379 to 159. And the tipping point state for both parties was Pennsylvania at 9.2%. So that, I would say, is pretty even. But still. And then you go to an election like 1980. And notice how popular vote-wise, again, 9.7% for Reagan, and he wins 49 to 49. Tipping point state, though, is Illinois at 7.93%. And I think what's important is that even though Reagan won had over 50% of the popular vote, he had not received a plurality in enough states to have won the a majority necessary to win the electoral college. Basically, if all the John B. Anderson voters voted for Jimmy Carter and all the other third parties voted for Jimmy Carter, he would have lost the popular vote and still won the election, which I find interesting. Yeah. I mean, Reagan actually even carried Massachusetts, to be fair, but story for another time. And then I think the best example might be 1944 and 1940. Because 1944, 432 to 99 in terms of the electoral college vote. Notice the popular vote margin, though. It's 7.5%, I want to say. So again, around the same as 2008, and the tipping point state was New York at 5.01%. 1940, 449 to 82, FDR does win a popular vote by 9.9%. Tipping point state, though, was Pennsylvania at 6.9%. And I'm wondering why I'm so annoying is emphasizing the tipping point state. The tipping point state is important to me because the tipping point state is it's like where the election shifts. How much does the nation have to shift? And because the popular vote doesn't, refer to who won the election, I feel as though when you look at the tipping point state, it shows you how close the election was. How much would they have needed a uniform shift in the nation to have won? And that's why I emphasize it. I put other numbers there just for perspective, but that's why I put so much of an emphasis on it. And when you look at it that way, I would say that with tipping point states around 9%, that 2008 is a landslide election for Democrats. I would say that not just in the modern era, but now it is. When you look at this map, when you see some of the states that Obama won, like Indiana and North Carolina, you'll sort of see what I mean about why I think it could have been that way. But, really. 2008, Obama's win had massive coattails. Democrats gained 8 seats in the Senate, and they gained 21 seats in the House. They actually won the House popular vote margin by 10.6% and attained a 257 to 178 majority. Meanwhile, in the Senate, flipping 8 seats, and they attained a 59 to 41 functioning majority in the Senate. It was crazy.